We are joined now by the Commissioner of the Big Ten, Jim Delany. Commissioner, appreciate your time on what is a historic day for the Big Ten. Let's start, first of all, with the decision to overhaul the divisions. I mean, there certainly would have been one school of thought of you put Maryland or Rutgers in the leaders, you put the other one in the legends, and you call it a day. Why make as dramatic a change as you did?
Well, you know, we talked about all the possibilities from adding to what we had already done and starting anew. And I think there's just a general sense, not only the fact that we added two members, you know, in coastal states that increased the breadth of the conference, but that there was a real opportunity here to increase the number of games in the conference, bind the conference together, preserve rivalries, and then sort of move forward. And we thought that at a minimum we ought to look at this in an open way. It's interesting. I know BTN, asked some questions and got over 60,000 responses, and it was interesting how much support there was for that. So while we didn't rely on it, we were aware of it, and I think that gave us some impetus to look at this anew.
So ultimately, what were the priorities then as you set out to make the divisions?
Well, as you recall, last time it was competitive balance, principle 1, preservation of rivalries 2, and geography 3. This time, rivalries maintained its position at 2, and we flipped geography and competitive balance. And so really the default position throughout was how do we maintain good geography, how do we do this in a way that builds the conference, binds it together, respects the historical rivalries, and then third was competitive balance with the belief that while that's a very rational approach we used the first time, going forward there's a lot of parity, and we're willing to take that risk. We looked at the SEC experience and noted that for the first decade of their realignment, you had Tennessee, Georgia, and Florida being very strong. In the second decade, it was more Auburn, Alabama, and LSU. And just a simple belief that the conference really has produced quality over time. We've had 9 different teams go to the Rose Bowl. I think we've had 6 or 7 teams go to BCS games. And that's going to be largely a function of the leadership at any particular campus at any particular time. And so we just thought being broader, being larger, that geography had to play a larger part.
So once you made the decision on geography, why east-west? Did you consider north and south, for instance?
Yeah, we did look at it, but we really feel like as you look at the map, and we now run from the Atlantic Ocean to the Colorado border and from the Canadian border in part to the Mid-South, that the east-west alignment could do the most for us in terms of preserving rivalries, fan travel, and just general sort of orientation. People don't think about going from north to south in the Big Ten. I think they think about going across Interstate 80, not necessarily Interstate 75.
How big a concern, and you talked about this a little bit, this shifting of priorities, but how big a concern is it that, at least based on most of the recent history, when you take it in the aggregate, the East appears to be stronger than the West?
Well, I think that's a factor, and obviously we had to make that judgment. The last time we made the judgment in favor of competitive balance, and at the end of the day, I think Wisconsin felt a little bit fish out of water because they were in a grouping that did not include on a regular basis some of the institutions in the western part of the conference. In this case, we number one, we feel like it's a national competition that we're involved with, just not a conference competition. And then anybody who wins in the West is going to have to play anyone who wins in the East. And so that should sort it out. The other thing was, I think that Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, and Nebraska were the 4 that were looked at as number 1 seeds. And obviously 3 of the 4 are in the East now. But also Iowa and Wisconsin were viewed as really the line right below that. And with Nebraska and with the emergence of Northwestern as a 10-win team, we felt like, there was enough competitive balance, and it wasn't perfect. Last time we had good geography, but not perfect geography. This time we have really, I think, perfect geography. We've been able to preserve 10 of the 13 name rivals We also really have bound the conference together because, when we were at 10 members, we had 40 games. And then with 11, we had 44. With 12, we had 48. Now we have 63. And so we have really increased the number of conference games by over 30% while only increasing the number of members by 16%. And so we feel like there's going to be more conference competition. In fact, a student-athlete who comes to a Big Ten team now will play every member at least once during their 4 years. And we feel like, given the growth of the conference, given our desire to really develop in the East, and also to create as much for the fans as possible, that this was, of the choices we had, was the preferred one.
Jim, one of the things that's always made the Big Ten so successful, everything from the bowl partnerships to this very network, is that it is a partnership of equals. And so I certainly don't want to in any way imply that it isn't. That being said, we know about the nature of the historic rivalry between Michigan and Ohio State and the power of those two schools and those two brands. How important was it to each of those schools to continue to play on the final Saturday of the regular season going forward?
That's always been a desire of theirs, as it has been at Purdue and Indiana. And so we took account of that. I think they were both institutions great. Last time when we identified competitive equality, they were in different divisions and accepted that. This time we looked at geography. It led them to be together. They accepted that. So while they have great historic importance, great football programs, great tradition, along with others in the conference, they were willing both before and now to be separated, but also be together as the as a consensus came together. I should point out that we're going to we are going to not only play more conference games, but we're also going to play fewer non-conference games. So we're going from 48 conference to 63 conference, and from 48 non-conference to 42. And inside the 42, there's not going to be FCS unless it's already contracted. So that means we're going to only be playing people that have the same number of scholarships. And then also we're all committed to playing at least one game against BCS-type opponents. In the last 5 years, it's been more like 20% of our opponents in that category. This increases that by 50% to 33. So, we think that's great for the postseason. We think it's great for our fans. It builds strength of schedule. And as a package, we think it makes us a much more, marketable entity from our fans' perspective, from the players' perspective, and from a television perspective as well.
I want to get into the implications of the 9-game schedule momentarily, because there obviously is a lot to talk about. But before we leave the divisions, we talked about Michigan and Ohio State now being in the same division and playing on that last Saturday, presumably. Should we expect to see mostly intra-divisional games? In other words, East teams playing East teams and West teams playing West teams on that final Saturday? Obviously, you can't do it with all of them because you have an uneven number of teams in each division. But will that be kind of the primary goal?
Yeah, I think we cannot do it exclusively, but I think we'll do it. That will be the dominant way of approaching it. I would also say that, we haven't totally decided it, but I think we're leaning in the direction of doing that and also moving some conference games earlier into the season. So we think overall we're reforming the package, we're restructuring the package, and we think that going forward it's the best way given where the conference sits now to make it as competitive and as appealing as possible.
And Commissioner Delany, why was this decision made ultimately to go to the 9-game schedule starting in 2016?
We had talked about 9 a lot over the last 4 or 5 years. We put it on hold when we were exploring the Big Ten Pac-12 collaboration. We weren't able to pull it off. We were somewhat disappointed, but realistic that we weren't able to do what we hoped to do. And so we had a moratorium on sort of scheduling. As we moved into expansion, we felt like, we wanted to play each other more, not less. We didn't have the collaboration. We explored that, run that out, and we just felt that, from a competitive perspective, whether you're looking at the playoff or looking at a future negotiation or looking at the fan, that more conference games rather than less was better. It's a good way to bind the conference together. It's a good way, I think, to increase your strength of schedule. And overall, we thought it was the right direction. We looked at 10 seriously, but it was going to be really difficult. A lot of these athletic departments build their foundation of their budget on 7 home games, and with 10, it would have been fairer, probably 5 home, 5 away, but it wasn't doable without really starting to move a lot of other arrangements from gate receipts, revenue sharing, television, and we wanted to maintain the equality, equitable approach that we have in those areas. So the compromise was 9. Inside each division, the 5-4 split will be identical, so that you're competing against people for a divisional crown that have the same 5-4 split as you do.
Yeah, how important was that? Because I think when people look at kind of the inequities in this, or the drawbacks maybe would be a better word for it, that fact that some years you'll have 5 conference home games and some years you'll have 4 would be the most obvious one. How satisfactory was that decision to kind of make it within the division?
Well, I think it was very important because the people you're competing against to play in the championship game will be treated in the same way. And a lot of thought was given here. The staff did a nice job. Athletic directors, got deep into the details. We looked at a lot of different models. We did a lot of research. And, I don't care where you start or where you end, or I do care about where you end, but where you start is with principles, and then you try to base your different models on those principles. And then when there's a default situation that you have to resolve, you resolve it in the name of the principle that you identified initially. It doesn't mean that you can't deviate, but it does mean that you have to respect what it is you start to do. Because there's no schedule which is perfect, there's no set of principles which are perfect. You simply have to have a set of priority principles laid out. And then I think, once they're laid out, that it gives you a roadmap to try to reach consensus and compromise. And, I'm really proud of our athletic directors, and I'm proud of our presidents for being able to approach this, which is a very sensitive subject, and end up in a unanimous support of the athletic directors' decision.
When you add a conference game, I think by definition you're adding a fairly difficult game, certainly when compared to, as you've touched on, some of those non-conference schedules the teams have played in recent years. How do you expect this now to impact higher profile non-conference games, given the fact that teams have added a more difficult game?
Those non-conference games are within the guidelines that we've laid out in control of the institutions. We're going to be as proactive as we can to bring other conferences to the table to have discussions, because we're only talking about 3 or 4 weeks within which those 42 games will occur. And not everybody's going to schedule the identical quality of opponent. I think you have to look at where your program is. Certainly, if you're in the middle echelon of our conference, you should be able to hopefully find someone in the middle echelon of another conference. If you're, trying to grab for that brass ring, and you want to play at the top, and you're trying to distinguish yourself, obviously at a top level, you're going to be trying to, identify an opponent that really impresses people. And so, with the FCS going out, it gives you a little bit more flexibility. 14 and 15 are transition years. Will be at 8, and you will see some FCS opponents are already contracted for. Going forward, I think everyone is going to make their best effort to achieve these things. If they have problem in achieving them, we'll talk among ourselves and figure out exactly if we need to accommodate, contracts. And there are also some very good football programs that are not in BCS automatic qualifying, historically qualifying conferences, and certainly some of those will meet the grade, and athletic directors will make that decision when necessary.
Commissioner, obviously a lot of publicity over the last week over the discussions for the new college football playoff. You were not only at those meetings, but a huge part of those meetings. What's the biggest takeaway from the Big Ten's point of view?
Well, I think we're moving in the right direction. We were also unveiling the logos and the public plan around celebrating the Rose Bowl's 100th game in January 1, 2014. They'll also host the last national championship game there. So that was really exciting to be part of. But I think that, we've come through this in a really good place. We establish a playoff. It's embedded in the bowl system. The Rose Bowl maintains its relevancy, so they're pleased. We're pleased that we're able to extend our agreement with ESPN for 12 years, and also that the playoff created so much public support. And the vote at the end of the day on all access points and revenue sharing was 12-0. There's been so much controversy over the last 15 or so years. It was great that we're able to start off with such a unified position. We identified 3 new bowls are going to be part of the system, and the Fiesta, the Cotton, and the Peach. And we are also working hard on the committee structure, although we're not anywhere near there. But I think what we really know is we want to have great football people with great reputations for integrity and making tough decisions under pressure be the core of that committee. And we can fill in around that. But if we start off with great football awareness and knowledge and great integrity, we think we'll be headed in the right direction. And certainly there's going to be a lot of tough calls to be made. Strength of schedule is going to be important. Winning championships, conference championships, and divisional championships should be tiebreakers, and they will, all other things being equal. And, we're putting together a staff to manage these games. Jerry Jones Stadium is going to be the host of the first championship game. We'll bid national championship games 2 and 3 out. We know what the rotation of the Rose Bowl semifinal will be over the 12-year period, and the conference is in the midst of discussions and negotiations with bowl partners for the next cycle below the Rose Bowl and the national championship. So it was good to be with colleagues. We made some progress, and we still have a to-do list.
You mentioned that to-do list, and you were talking a bit about the selection committee there, and I think that's the one that a lot of people are interested in.
Yep.
What's a timetable, do you think, for deciding who's going to compose that committee and when? Well,
structurally, I think this summer and early fall, probably late this summer, because we would like to do some mock work during the 2013 season. We obviously won't select teams, but we want to get them identified this summer, I think, and get the procedures governing the committee in place, and then begin to bring them together so they can get a feel for each other, develop a little bit of a culture, and take a look at the 13 season. But at the end of the day, the 2 teams will be identified through the historic BCS processes, and I expect this committee to be sort of identified later in the summer, and that maybe they start meeting in an informal way to get familiar with each other, and then we'll kick it off for real in 2014.
Commissioner, I almost hate to ask you this on a day where you've resolved the divisions, but I feel like every time I talk to you, I have to ask the question, what's the latest on Big Ten expansion?
Before or since the Maryland and Rutgers edition, we've been working, full speed ahead on administration, financial, and academic integration. We're going to continue to do that. I think that each conference, whether it's the Big 12, the ACC, the Pac-12, the Big Ten, all of us are alert and aware to what's going on. And I think different entities, conferences, whether it's the ACC or the Big 12, adopt positions to protect themselves, as they should. And I did read with interest the ACC's embracing the assignment of rights. We've done that. We've been doing that for 25 years, since 1988. The Pac-12 did it to establish a network. The Big 12 has done it even though they don't have a network and don't plan on having one. And the ACC is looking at establishing, at least reviewing the possibility of establishing a network. I think people read it mostly as a protective measure, but I also think it's a measure that you have to undertake if you're going to look at a network. So our position really hasn't changed. We weren't active. We're not active, but we're always alert to what's going on and watch it. We had a good call with our presidents this morning. The subject didn't come out, wasn't on the agenda, and it wasn't raised. So we're going to continue to do what we do, which is to build our conference.
Well, Commissioner, congratulations on a big day for the Big Ten. Thanks again for your time.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.